Gold continues to break records every single day this week, and that's because it's World War III. You see, gold is a barometer for social chaos. There's an inverse relationship between the price of gold and societal peacetime, okay? The higher the price of gold and the faster it ticks upwards, correspondingly, the faster social deterioration. Now, right now, they want you to buy Bitcoin, and I'm by no means a gold peddler. Yes, we've done some videos on gold. It's not at the top of my priority list in terms of prepping, because the downside is, as you see that price of gold going up, it's going to become harder and harder for you to defend it because, again, it's a barometer for social chaos, as is the case as reflected here in the New York subway system, where you now have the National Guard wielding full auto weapons, okay, to police the population because I guess things are just that bad right now. You got the National Guard with machine guns in New York City, in a democracy, as we are told. But of course, as we get down to crunch time, in hard times, and especially times of war, all societies, no matter how democratic, they become authoritarian necessarily. It's called martial law. It's called war mobilization, military draft, conscription, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, you bet it's coming. Now, in terms of the other stuff we had to endure in the last 24 hours, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow has issued a warning, okay, 48 hours warning of a very high likelihood of a major attack in Moscow. Now, we're going to parse this and tease this out in just a moment, but I should also, of course, talk briefly about what we all had to endure, or any of us who cared to subject ourselves to it. But of course, I'm talking about the State of the Disunion address, which was given by the one and only JB. And he was actually on point for the first 25 minutes. He was surprisingly lucid and coherent and came right out the gates. Of course, Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. I was actually kind of surprised by that. I think it's a testament to the fact that they're not letting this go, okay? That's their baby, and they're not going to let it go. They spent the most amount of time right out the gates talking about how they got to get money to Ukraine. Don't worry, we're not going to send troops, they say. We're just going to send a lot of money. And Macron, he's going to be the one, you know, the Napoleon guy with the nuclear weapons. He's going to lead the EU in the charge against Vladimir Putin. And of course, he himself has declared that there are no more red lines, meaning that they're going to put troops very soon, very, very soon. The Russian election is 1 week away. It is a pivotal turning point because after that time, Russia is going to fully militarize the likes of which we haven't seen in many generations. Mark my words, Alexander Dugin, also known as Putin's brain, has basically laid out the plan as it's going to unfold. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that today. But yeah, in terms of, you know, the funny thing about Biden's speech is that it was delayed for a half an hour because you had these protesters protesting the plight of the Gazan people outside the Capitol, of course, protesting the fact that they've been subsisting off of cats and seawater for the longest time while we provide aid in the form of bombs to destroy them. But now, of course, we're going to make it all better because apparently the U.S. is going to build a military base, humanitarian port, so that they can bring in more humanitarian supplies. But don't worry, there's not going to be any soldiers there with guns, and it's not a tripwire just to try to encourage Hamas to attack this port so that we can justify putting troops on the ground because we know the war with Lebanon is coming. Man, my mind is racing at 1,000,000 miles a minute, guys. We need to talk first and foremost about the U.S. Embassy warning of an imminent attack in Moscow. What the hell is this all about? The State Department comes out of nowhere, and even the Russian government is like, wait, what the hell is this about? The Russian government hasn't given an official statement yet, but diplomats have urged American citizens, whichever ones are left, I think the only one left there is Lynn Tracy, who's the American ambassador, because of course there's been a level 4 travel advisory to Russia since the war began. Anyways, they're warning American citizens. Interestingly, they didn't say Muscovites or all Russians. They said that American citizens need to avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours. Well, what could this possibly mean? I think there are 5 possible explanations. We're going to do a little spitballing, but we need to do this, okay? Because this could be a very critical moment. In the next week, again, you have the Russian election coming. You have a major Polish delegation heading to Washington. They, of course, are going to be the next bulwark when Ukraine inevitably collapses. Certainly in the eastern part, that's coming, which is why, of course, Macron is rallying the troops. They are scared. But there's 5 possible reasons for this. But let me just read you exactly what the warning is first. The embassy is monitoring reports that extremists have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow, to include concerts, and U.S. citizens should be advised to avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours, the diplomatic mission said in a statement. Now, this could be, number one, is this the CIA? Let's face it, let's just throw that out there. I'm not saying this is the case, but it could be something that our intelligence agency has cooked up, and they're trying to front run the news, thereby absolving themselves of responsibility. They can say, well, you can't blame us because we warned you. Why would we be doing something if we warned you? Because, of course, if something does happen and the Russians point the finger at the United States can now say, hey, we warned you. Or, number 2, it is that the Ukrainians, some rogue element in the Ukrainian intelligence services and their saboteur network in Russia, is planning on doing some crazy stuff, possibly dirty bomb stuff. You just never know. Okay, shit could hit the fan in a wild way right now. And maybe there's some division amongst all of the interests that are involved, be it the Brexit crowd or the EU crowd or the United States. There are differences within the transatlantic alliances and how they want to deal with this Ukrainian situation. So it could be that the CIA is saying, hey, we don't want you to do this. Or like I say, there could be rogue partisan elements acting autonomously, and the United States caught wind of this, and they're warning their population, okay? But why would they phrase it in such a way is the question. Or this could just be a technicality. This could just be somebody phoned in a bomb threat and they're doing their due diligence, okay, to cover their bases, which I highly doubt, because in that case, they would have most certainly framed it in a different way. The Russians, I believe, based on the media reports that I've read, they think that this is more just an attempt to inject misinformation, and it's a subversive campaign of sorts to try to create ambivalence and confusion in the run-up to the election, just to try to disturb, people while they're in the process of voting. That's one possible explanation. Now, the last possible explanation is that perhaps the United States caught wind that the Russians themselves are planning some sort of false flag event that, of course, would be leveraged to galvanize the population for war, especially after Putin decides to militarize, like he most certainly is going to after he wins this election. Once this is overcome, right now you're seeing a lot of politicians, come out and give speeches that I've never seen before. I mean, you got Macron, you got Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU, you got Patrushev, who's I can't remember, he's like the head of not the head of the spy service in Russia, the head of the intelligence apparatus possibly. But this is a guy who's always very quiet, but even he's rocking the mic. You got even Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Medvedev, the incorrigible one. He's up there rocking the mic in ways that I've never seen before. So this whole, patriotic thing, this, I guess, is part of the whole political season in Russia. But indeed, something big is building here, okay? We're reaching a critical point of inflection that's going to happen after the election. And you could see this one coming from miles away. Now, this alert was issued amid the ongoing tensions between Moscow and Washington. Now, there's a risk that the American ambassador is going to be kicked out, Lynn Tracy. And the Russian Foreign Ministry summoned that ambassador, demanding that the embassy cut all ties with 3 U.S.-funded NGOs whose work was recently banned in Russia. Okay, probably some espionage-related stuff. They are, in fact, at war. So this is not surprising. In fact, I'm very surprised that there's still an ambassador there at all, considering there's a level 4 travel advisory in the country. Typically, you don't get an ambassador. I think they make an exception because, of course, it's Russia and you need that nuclear red line, especially when you're lining up F-35s all down the Russian border as we speak, and you're training in pretty much every country how to launch those planes from highways, okay? Wow, I can't believe it, man. I mean, it's happening right before our eyes in slow motion. This is exactly what you would see in the run-up to the shit hitting the fan. And I'm telling you, gold is the barometer. Well, whether you own it or not, it's just something to pay attention to. Okay, if you start to see that price going up wildly, that means that there's a major disturbance in the force. Never mind Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a diversion away from gold. I assure you that they're going to come out with a Bitcoin 2.0 rug pull or something, and everybody's going to go broke. I think that's coming because the thing is, it's intangible and it's replicable. People say, well, you can't replicate Bitcoin. Yeah, you can. You can just make another, whole cryptocurrency code and you get the media to pump that and everybody puts their money into that and then Bitcoin collapses. Of course, Bitcoin and its mysterious origins, don't get me started on that. Don't get me started about all the mystery money that moves in and out of it. I think that there's a lot of speculation. See, with gold, there's not nearly the amount of volatility. You're looking at 20% volatility at best over the last 5 years. So anyways, this is not a gold pitch. I really have no dog in that fight. The Foreign Ministry further threatened to expel any U.S. embassy employees who will attempt to interfere in domestic affairs of the Russian Federation, including subversive campaigns and misinformation. Now, this is an RT breakdown of the travel advisory security alert that was released by the State Department. So this is their take, and this is the Russians, like they're a very judicious bunch of people, okay? They like their litigious language. So they're not ever going to, come out and say anything that is impulsive. And so they phrase these things in such a way to maintain that sort of professional, diplomatic, phlegmatic approach to things. And basically they're saying here that in the context, in the conflict in Ukraine and the upcoming presidential election, subversive campaigns and misinformation will not be tolerated, effectively chalking this up to that very thing. And I would have to agree, this is very suspicious that this sort of warning would be released in the way that it is. So we're going to have to pay attention to this one. Now, on the Polish front, okay, we got a lot of news to talk about today. I hope this is not a 50-minute video because I got to get to bed. But I warned you recently that the Polish Prime Minister and President are going to Washington in the next couple days before the Russian election, which is going to be next week. Now, these guys are on opposite ends of the political spectrum. So the thinking is that both of them are going there for something incredibly serious, because in what situation are you going to send two of your top heads of state out of the country, especially when you're so proximate to a war zone that could flare up at any moment? Okay, that means whoever's third in charge is running the country at that point. And so they're both going there. The assumption is that whatever is going to be discussed, they don't want any sort of division on. So they want everybody on the same page. So in the run-up to this, and this is incredibly important, you want to know why Steadfast Defender is going on? Well, here's why. The Polish Parliament has started processing a bill that will lead to the suspension of Poland's participation in the Conventional Forces Treaty signed in 1990 between the NATO and Warsaw Pact countries. The treaty, which has formally been binding up until now, among others, limited the number of conventional heavy weapons, made it possible to visit each other's bases, very much like all these other nuclear treaties that are now dead or defunct, made it possible to visit each other's bases to check compliance, and operated the Joint Consultative Group, which could issue recommendations to signatory countries. Now, once Poland abandons the treaty, it will not only be free from notifying Russia about any military matters, but will also be able to amass in its bases unlimited armaments and personnel. Well, what do they have there right now? They have 100,000 additional NATO soldiers, or maybe not 100,000, but a large amount, okay, that are due to this Steadfast Defender. So these guys are there to stay. That's the thing. This is permanent deployment. Poland is the next spearhead for what's about to happen when Ukraine collapses. Mark my words. The F-16 basically creates a situation where, operationally speaking, there is no border, because you cannot distinguish a Ukrainian F-16 from a Romanian one, and the Ukrainians simply don't have the facilities to launch these F-16s from and maintain them. So the implication is that as soon as the F-16 arises in this conflict zone, that necessitates the involvement of NATO to such an extent which is undeniable. Okay, it's no longer a de facto state of war. It becomes de jure at that point in time. Andrzej Duda, who will be going together with Prime Minister Donald Tusk to the U.S. in the coming days, has called an unplanned meeting of the National Security Council, a body which includes the representatives of all 11 parties which have deputies in the parliament. The idea is to brief all present at a closed-door meeting of the situation and agree to a common position before talks with President Joe Biden begin. So this is big. Whatever they're going there to talk about is massive. And of course, weapons have been pouring into Poland like crazy as of recent. In a TV interview, the mayor of Warsaw, the biggest city in Poland, I presume, Rafał Trzaskowski, declared that the capital's authorities have carried out an audit and are sure that there would be enough space in some sort of shelter for every inhabitant. Why would you feel the need to do that? Could it be that you're expecting either a high-intensity conventional war or a potential nuclear strike? Now, I don't think the Russians will nuke Warsaw, but recall what one of their chief propagandists, Solovyov, said recently. He said, do not confuse our leniency that we're having for the Ukrainian population. For some people who don't understand and are just blinded by the propaganda, you're not going to get this statement, but there is in fact leniency, considering the fact that the amount of civilians killed is less than that of the Gazan war that we're currently seeing, in spite of the fact that it's been 2 years and it's been, just a lot more fighting going on, okay? So the Russians view the Ukrainians as their brothers. So they say. This is the Russian point of view. Solovyov said, we don't view the Poles like that. We're not going to show restraint. We're going to go scorched earth. We're going to go total war, and it's going to look a lot like Baghdad did when the U.S. invaded. That's what he said. So perhaps Poland is aware of this, and they're very concerned that ultimately the main conflict is with Poland, which is the bulwark of NATO. And of course, NATO and all its conflicting interests are currently puppeteering the Ukrainian regime. Now, that's what the Russians think. Okay, I'm not saying that's what I think, but they're thinking that, that the hand of the West has its hand up the ass of the puppets in Ukraine, and basically they're trying to force those puppets to fight against their brethren. So they view it as fratricide that's occurring right now. So they're not going to be as lenient on the Poles. Anyways, that's pretty much it with respect to Poland, okay? Now, in terms of what Macron has said today, you're having all these speeches, okay, of all these politicians just coming out of the woodwork, it seems, and this is really something you would see like a propaganda rallying cry that you would see right in the run-up to war mobilization. Certainly in the EU and Russia, this is occurring. Of course, we've become desensitized to Zelensky's appeals at this point in time, and I'm pretty sure, if only because he's losing his appeal with people, they're going to put somebody else in there. In fact, Zaluzhny, the former commander of the Ukrainian military, is now leaving the country to go to the UK. I mean, how much sense does that make? Something big is going on there. So you have Nuland falling, you have Zaluzhny following. So you know that, I mean, it's tragic to say this, man, but I think that the Ukrainian population has been used to, and you're seeing them fight back. The commissars, the guys who go out to just put people in vans to go and fight on the front line against their will, because it's conscription, it's martial law. You can say it's legal or it's not. The way they do it is not necessarily in the most jurisprudent of ways. Excuse me. Anyways, I watched a video today. These commissars go into this community. There's two of them. and it looks like a rural community in Ukraine somewhere. And one of the Ukrainian guys who they're trying to basically force to come with them, he's on a horse, okay? And then there's this other car that's coming up the road. He smokes one of the commissars, puts him on his ass, and then he gets out of the car with an axe, and he hits him on the blunt side of the axe, not the sharp side, and then he starts smashing the windows, and these guys are getting their asses kicked all throughout the country. So what you're not seeing is that there is a revolt that is, or maybe not a revolt, but there is major resistance to this military drafting, especially considering I'm presuming that a lot of these guys they're trying to recruit are, Russian-born, not Russian-born, but primarily their main language is Russian. And perhaps they even, have some sympathies to, or maybe they might have voted in that direction in the past, and this is why they're trying to recruit these particular people to go and fight on the front line, okay? So, yeah, man, it's a crazy situation that's happening right now. Macron said this today, and this is how you know that we've reached a whole new level here, okay? Macron has said, there are no more red lines. There are no more limits in terms of supporting Ukraine. Again, I don't know if we're in frickin' Austerlitz or Barbarossa at this point in time. You got Leopard tanks and you got Napoleon rocking the mic. What the hell is going on? Anyways, Medvedev said in response to this, well, I guess that means Russia has no more red lines left for France. So I talked the other day about the Germans doing their exercise that simulates the top leadership retreating to their nuclear bunkers. You can bet your ass Macron is taking inventory of his nuclear bunker right now because things are about to get spicy. France's involvement does not stop there, okay? Get a load of this. Moldova has withdrawn from the Conventional Armed Forces Treaty in Europe, the same one that the Poles did, or are going to. And of course, they're doing this because of all of the provocations happening in Transnistria, and that tension is really starting to build up there. That is most certainly going to be a kickoff point. And what they probably know is that in the next 1 to 2 months, according to many military analysts, the Russians are about to attack along the entire front line, including, of course, coming over the river near Kherson and Mykolaiv, and then going into Odessa, and then, of course, creating a land bridge to Transnistria. But there's another region, an autonomous region, I believe, of Moldova called Gagauzia. And I didn't even know about this until a week ago. I'm still learning just like you guys. Anyways, Eugenia Gutsal, who is the head of this region, she left that country, or part of Moldova, I guess you could say, that district, and she went to Russia, okay? Now, the idea is that she's probably going to be arrested when she gets back. So, by the Moldovan government, because the Moldovans still officially have control over this region, I do believe. I don't think it's like Transnistria where they have like the Russian army there. So unless Transnistria is going to come to their aid or something like that, I don't know how this is going to work. Anyways, the risk is that she is going to be arrested when she goes back there. So what could be so important that you would fly to Russia knowing that you were going to be arrested when you got back? Now, the same situation that we've seen in the Donbass, what they're saying is that their people are being persecuted, that the primarily pro-Russian population in those countries is being persecuted. This is what you're going to see happen throughout all the Baltic states. This is going to be the recipe, okay? The populations of Russian-speaking people are going to be vilified as they are throughout the entirety of the Baltic states right now, and that is going to give Vladimir Putin an excuse to go in and rescue those people. At least that's what Joe Biden, that's the longer form. Of course, he's a lot more brief and blinkered in terms of the information that he provides people. Possibly he doesn't even, really truly understand how this situation could unfold. But the only feasible way that Putin would ever want to go into these countries was to come to the rescue, I suppose, of the Russian population there. So it's important to understand this because this is where the shit is likely going to hit the fan next, and it's very close to Romania. Moldova has just signed an agreement with France. Okay, you see where this is going? France Defense Cooperation Agreement. They signed an agreement that establishes a legal framework for the future of military training, regular dialogue, and intelligence exchange. A defense mission will open in Chisinau in the summer to help assess the country's need to begin negotiations on possible arms contracts. They are arming to hell. And remember, the biggest ammunition dump currently is in Transnistria, and I just recently learned that that place is mined to hell. And when it blows up, they're saying that is going to be the equivalent shockwave of or equivalent tremor of a 7 on the Richter scale earthquake if they decide to blow all that ammunition so that the Ukrainians can't get it. I'm telling you, man, crazy shit is about to go down. Like I said, experts are predicting that the Russians are going to make a move. Now, get a load of this. Residents of Ukraine are fleeing areas that Russia has declared its historical territory. So all of that pushback that I was telling you about before, it factors in here too. Okay, so the pro-Ukrainian elements are fleeing because they see the writing on the wall. The Ukrainians can't build the defensive fortifications in many of these places fast enough. They're trying to build their own version of the Serovikin line with the, what are they called? The dragon's teeth and the mines and all that stuff. But they're not able to do it in all the places at once. They're stretched pretty thin. They don't know where all their conscripts are. So anyways, residents of Ukraine are fleeing areas that Russia has declared as its historical territory and future buffer zone. But some of them are captured by military commissars, scooped up, put in the back of vans, and sent back to the front line, of course. The authorities of these regions are evacuating. The authors, and this could, I want to just outright say, this could be propaganda. The fog of war is thick, but if I was a betting man, I would bet that this is probably what's about to happen. The authorities of these regions are evacuating. Power and paragovernmental structures in Kharkov, like a big city, 1 million strong city of Kharkov. I think primarily Russian speaking, if I'm not mistaken. If I am, I apologize. Odessa and Nikolaev have already begun secret evacuation to the west of Ukraine. That's serious, guys. That means that these are going to be the battlegrounds. I mean, if they're going to actually fight a war in Kharkov, that's going to be, I mean, if you thought Bakhmut that had a population of what, like 80,000 people? We're talking about a city of 1 million people, okay? I don't even know, I don't think they're going to actually, I hope they're not going to fight a war in that city, because that would just be a complete and utter disaster. I presume that the Russians will try to encircle it somehow and just choke them out. But even that is going to be bloody. Also, citizens are slowly fleeing the regions. They understand Ukrainian armed forces have prepared for them the role of a human shield. Of course, non-combatants placed around the target to repel enemy tactics. So according to this, obviously Russian-leaning source, they are saying that they're trying to employ the Hamas tactic of keeping civilians around to act as human shields, and then they could say, you killed the civilians, right? So, I mean, yeah, if you are defending a place, you want the civilian population to stay there, especially if you're fighting a superior foe who has more manpower and who has more weapons. But according to many of the experts, whether they're pro or anti-Russian, estimates range from 1 to 2 months to 3 to 4 months for another major offensive in one part of the region. If they change their tactics, what we're seeing is we might see some strategic retreats. It might just be like what the Russians did when they backed off across Kherson. Maybe the Ukrainians actually get smart and they basically cash their chips in and save to fight another day. And they do the smart thing, but they might not do that. They might decide to, do this more Machiavellian move where they put their troops amongst the civilian population and try to fight the Russians in a city like Kharkov, which of course will be a humanitarian disaster on a scale possibly not even seen in Gaza, but I think it's unlikely that it's going to rival that. Anyways, it's going to be a crazy, crazy year, man. I mean, just think of everything that's happened already this year. I mean, people forget like the cyber attacks. And anyways, Norwegian F-35s prepare for strategic deployments to unconventional airfields. Why are they doing all of this unconventional airfield training? What they really mean here isn't highway. Okay, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about flying these planes from highways. Now under review is the stratagem of deploying the F-35A from smaller Norwegian airfields. Such a move carries significant tactical value. By dispersing the fleet across multiple locations, there's a significant reduction in the chance of an adversary disabling a large portion of the fleet. They're preparing for nuclear war. And, as evidenced in Dmitry Medvedev's statements in his speech he gave the other day, where he was talking to Obama, and Obama was telling him about their plans to invade Syria. And of course, Russia has a presence there, so they had this conversation. And, Medvedev asked him, well, what is the outcome going to be? What are you going to do after you've taken over the country? And Obama said, well, we haven't really thought that far ahead yet. And Medvedev said that this sent chills down his spine, that we are so blinkered in our approach to strategic thinking that we don't think beyond what's right in front of us. And this is partly probably the consequence of just our cushy lifestyles that we lead. Like in that video that I did, one of our flagship videos where I talk about my philosophy of preparedness, very fancy presentation we put together. One of the things I mentioned in that video is how we live in our current society, where there's very little hardship for the most part. Yeah, you got to work the humdrum job and be a drone for 8 hours a day. But above and beyond that, you really don't have to think that much. Everything is automated, okay? So you don't have to think strategically. You don't have to think over the horizon. And why would we think our leaders are going to be capable of doing any more than that? Of course they don't. So this is what Medvedev was talking about. They don't have a plan. Right now, the only plan we have is to deploy tactical nukes from a bunch of stealth F-35s and just hope for the best thereafter. And so this is the real scary part about our military leaders. As much as we want to think that they have a plan, chances are, based on what we are seeing, at this point in time, if we still believe that these guys are the all-seeing eye that they're chalked up to be by the little secret symbology on the dollar bill and the various comedic occult references at the Denver airport, guys, I think that's all just misdirection. I think that when it comes down to it, they are a reflection of us. And take a look at TikTok, as above, so below. These are guys with a bunch of tactical nukes and some fancy F-35s invented by some nerds who know their stuff. Unfortunately, they don't have the moral acumen and they don't have the foresight in order to use it strategically. So when the shit hits the fan, what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, let's just launch all these F-35s with tactical nukes from airfields. And oh yeah, the submarines too, and the Minuteman missiles, they're basically sitting ducks. But this is the plan, okay? And I think they're strongly considering a decapitation strike. I've talked about this before, and even the Russians think that that's the case too, because that's really their only hope in hell. If they can get enough forward deployed stealth bomber type systems, mini stealth bombers, which is like what the F-35s are, armed with these tactical nukes, and they can put them in the right places at the right time, they may be able to subjugate Russia. And even if, they ride it out in their bunkers, if they can do the right kind of decapitation strike and they can bypass the dead hand system and make sure that Russia can't launch anything, I do believe that there's maybe some people thinking about that. So let's hope they don't, because that would be catastrophic. But what better way than to end a fiat money printing party than to just go out with a bang, right? Everybody's putting their money in Bitcoin. You might as well it's Looney Tune land. So why not? It would map on perfectly to how we've been living thus far. And remember, as I said, the F-16s, there's major drawbacks with the F-16s, okay? They require pristine, large runways, they require specialized maintenance, and they require unique depot facilities. These infrastructure requirements would be nearly impossible to conceal from satellite observations. So what does this mean? This means that the F-16, People keep saying, oh, they keep talking about its tactical and operational utility. That's not the point. The F-16 is a symbol of a Rubicon that gets crossed where you have NATO fully at war with the Russians. Because that's the only way, based on my limited knowledge of this stuff, as far as I can tell at this point in time, I think I have a fairly decent ability to reason. That's the only way you can leverage it, is if you launch it from Poland or Romania. And Russia has distinctly said, if you do that, we're going to target those airports, which is why Poland is going to Washington. You see how these things are fitting together? Maria Zakharova, Russia's other chief diplomat, has said that if nuclear facilities, she's talking about nuclear weapons because of course Finland was talking about getting nuclear weapons. She says that if they appear in the countries of Northern Europe, they will become legitimate targets in case of war between Russia and NATO. One does not need to be a military strategist to understand such facilities will represent a source of direct threat and will naturally and inevitably be included in the list of legitimate targets defined by the scenario of a direct military clash between our country and NATO. As a result, she said, the security of other countries that would host nuclear weapons would suffer. That's a thing. It's a double-edged sword, man. Because right when you bring nukes, never mind nukes, right when you bring F-35s into your country, you become a tack on a map for the Russians, okay? And now you got German MPs calling for attacks on Russia. People have lost their minds, man. People just keep pushing and pushing. And this is the problem. This is why I have to agree with some of the Russian hardliners who are saying, look, you need to just use a nuke now to put this to stop this situation in its tracks. Because these people are not going to stop. Macron just said there's no red lines. So if we don't use a nuke right now in some capacity somewhere, whether it's detonating it in the fields of Siberia or putting it in, the plains of Ukraine, if we don't do something now, they're going to keep on pushing until it's too late and we're going to have to launch everything. The best way you can prevent that from escalating is to use a nuke right now. That's what they're talking about. What's going on in the Middle East? Well, the U.S. is about to set up a base off the Gaza coastline. People are saying it's for natural gas and stuff. Look, they're not doing this for a little bit of natural gas. I mean, you look at Russia's natural gas, you look at the Americans' natural gas. I mean, the trillions upon trillions of cubic meters of natural gas in the ground compared to what the paltry deposits, relatively speaking, off the course of Gaza. This is not the primary motivation. The purpose of this depot that they're setting up, which is of course going to be a tripwire because yes, you're going to have people try to attack it, I don't doubt. And when that happens, they're going to say, oh, well, now we have to militarize it. But the purpose is to send a message to Lebanon, because you don't even hear about this in the news. You don't even hear about the fact that the Houthis are targeting a ship every other day. In fact, they just targeted one. The first time ever civilians died. Okay, the first time civilians actually died. They're sinking ships. You don't even hear about it anymore. This is the new plateaus of normalcy. And this is what those Russian hardliners are saying. They're saying, look, if we don't do something to interdict this trajectory towards nuclear Armageddon now with something that is like, we got to hit them with something, then it's going to get much worse. Anyways, Iran seized another oil vessel worth $50 million. Doesn't even make the news anymore. And they're going to offload the oil. They're just going to take it back. There was explosions again in Iran. Several people were killed and others were injured in an explosion at the Bandar Abbas oil refinery in southern Iran, right off the Strait of Hormuz. Didn't even hear about it in the media. Okay, the Iranians openly blamed the Israelis for the pipeline explosion 2 weeks ago. You don't even hear any of this anymore. Zelensky motorcade targeted an assassination attempt. You don't hear about that anymore, even though a lot of people think that was bullshit. Medvedev thinks it was bullshit, but it's Medvedev, right? Anyways, this situation. Oh yeah, and then there's the weather. I don't even want to get into this because it's been so heavily politicized. We're going to have an expert on here on Monday. But man, it's getting so hot around the world right now. Like the records for sea surface temperature anomaly are off the charts. This map right here, don't just say, oh, they color it red because they want to scare people. This is just science, guys, okay? This is, the red means there's a 70 to 100% chance that it is going to be above the, I believe this is the 1.5 degree threshold this year. So remember where they were talking about, oh, we got to keep things below 1.5. Well, it already was like 1.8. Okay, so in the last year or so, it's just blown past in terms of the heat. This is why you're seeing like the thing that happened in Texas. And a family sent me a message recently. I'm going to read it. I'm going to do a dedicated video because it's a very powerful story, and it's motivating, and I also want to help them out too. So I hope we can come together as a community to talk about that, because they got caught up in that whirlwind of a fire, record fire before fire season, you know. And then in California, you get these massive dumps of snow. It's just the weather is so incredibly erratic, and just chaos, chaos, chaos every single place you look. And people are spending their money on an intangible thing that only has value because we agree that those digits on a screen have value, and because it uses energy. According to the Sailor Man, Michael Saylor, that's why. It uses energy, so it must be valuable. So yeah, you know, Sweden joins NATO, 32nd country to join NATO. I mean, this is all planned. They wanted, you know, these guys, I think they get bored. Have you ever seen the movie Cabin in the Woods? There's some elements of realism, you know. I think the people in charge, they get a little bored sometimes, and they're like, we gotta make this a little bit more interesting. We want a special country to be number 33 just because. Maybe it's going to be Israel, maybe it's going to be Ukraine, but it's going to be a special one. So we got to make sure we get Finland and Sweden in there before, just so we, like, you know, nail it with the 33, right? To appease the sun gods or whatever. Oh, I don't know. I don't even know anymore, man. I don't even know why I do this anymore, to be brutally honest, because I should be prepping. I mean, I should be prepping, but here we go. The military is going to recruit immigrants. Czech Republic's going to send 800,000 artillery rounds to Ukraine, yada, yada, yada. U.S. is going to ban TikTok. No love lost. I got 220,000 followers on TikTok. Guys, come over to the Canadian Prepper YouTube channel. I could not care less if I never use TikTok again. I hate that frickin' platform. I absolutely despise it. I don't care if they ban my account. I just can't stand TikTok at all. I don't like the policies where they just allow people to copy any other thing without giving any credit to the original creator. I don't like the fact that the algorithm is used to dumb people down and make them stupid, when in China, the whole point is to uplift and to educate people. And it's just meant to be divisive, to get people fighting with one another. And just the amount of dumb shit I see on that app it's so incredibly, like, it's infuriating. I don't even know why I care so much, but it's just one of those things. There's something about the app, you're like, yeah, this is like destroying society. Not to say YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels, who've all tried to emulate that, have almost gotten as bad, but at least there's another component to it, and that's not its only thing. And of course, we live in a glass house. We don't have an app in China like that where we're controlling. And I'm not like one of these anti-China, yeah, let's go to war with China people. I think China is a great civilization. You know, I have nothing against Chinese people, but TikTok, man, that's dangerous, dangerous stuff, okay? South Korea is preparing to destroy the North. Fat chance of that. We're going to have a guest on, probably release a video tomorrow, the author of a very good book, probably one of the most well-traveled people in terms of going and seeing bunkers, secret places where he was arrested, where he wasn't supposed to be. This guy has basically met every prominent, notable figure within the preparedness community, and he's here to tell his complete story about the things he's found. And his views on North Korea is that there's a reason why we ain't going in there, okay? Because what you see from above ground ain't but 10% of what is going on. We're talking, these guys are dug in deep. We're talking Gaza times 10,000, okay? So you're gonna wanna stick around for that. I'm telling you, man, we're trying to do whatever we can to get you guys, as much information as possible. If you want to support the channel, the best way, CanadianPreparedness.com. Honestly, don't make much on the business, believe it or not. If you've seen the books, you would know what I mean. But it does keep people employed. I want to keep people having jobs. I like the gear. I like getting people the quality gear because there's so many peddlers of bad shit right now. There's a company out there called, how can I say it in a way that I don't get sued? Let's just say they play on people's patriotism. And there's a lot of YouTube channels, probably, I think some of them, like people I've even interviewed, and I think I have to have a personal conversation with them about it. I think they're just oblivious to it, they're not aware, but there's others who know damn well that this is just shit that they're selling people. And people buy it because they trust the people, and in the very least, I just want to make sure people say, oh, you're a salesman, you're capitalizing, blah, blah, blah. I was a buyer long before I was ever a seller, but I seen something that was missing in the market, and it was that people were being swindled. They were being given subpar quality products that when the shit hits the fan, they're either not going to perform as you need them to keep you alive, or they're just going to make for an uncomfortable experience. So my goal at CanadianPreparedness.com is to get people the gear they need. I don't even like talking about it. I don't even like self-promotion. It just doesn't feel right to me, so I very seldom will plug it, usually towards the end of the video, like something like this. But that's the way you support the channel. Use coupon code SurvivalPrepper for 10% off. Anyways, the video is not done yet. NATO bringing Patriot missiles closer to Russia. US-made air defense systems will be deployed to Lithuania in 2024. What could go wrong? In 2024? Oh yeah, that's this year. Right. We're going to deploy missile defense to Lithuania, which of course is right on the fringes of good old Kaliningrad. That is constantly cloaked in GPS jamming because I think we're already at war with the Russians, as I've recently speculated. Again, Biden, just to reiterate, he opened up his speech insisting that Putin is not going to stop in Ukraine. However, providing very little evidence to suggest why he would not stop. I've given you some reasons today, the repatriation thing and the putting in, Russians who will be subjugated by and subject to Russophobia. But there's no evidence to suggest that. I mean, if you have some evidence, feel free to post it in the comment section below. Is it because these vague theories about him wanting to recreate the Soviet Union? I mean, I understand that. I mean, I think this is projection too, right? Because we have our own sphere of influence. I mean, who runs NATO? Let's be honest. Who has the U.S. global reserve currency? I mean, for us to say that power corrupts and that the more you get, the more you want, that's true, because that's what the modus operandi we've been operating on up until this point. So of course we're going to accuse the other side of doing that, and they're probably not wrong. Once Russia gets a taste of that expanded sphere of influence, what's next? The tendency is always, whether you think Putin's a good guy or not, any empire wants to expand its borders, or in the very least, in the case of China, for instance, they want to create a buffer zone. Okay, like without North Korea, we would already be at war with the Chinese. That's like their back door. Okay, that's something you're not going to mess with. Anyways, Alexander Dugin, Putin's brain, he says the following. Today, we vitally need total and comprehensive militarization of the country, state, and people. Militarization means transferring society to a military footing. The scale and main vectors of militarization can be debated, since it depends on the specific historical and geopolitical situation, on economic opportunities and resources, and political ideology and cultural dominance. He's essentially laying the philosophical and sociocultural groundwork for a move towards rapid and widespread industrialization of the Russian war machine, which is already happening, but he's talking more about a nationalistic thing. And this is where you could see Russia slide into not necessarily a fascistic, but a more jingoistic approach to how they run their society, which of course could become imperialistic at some point in time. Anyways, they're going to militarize after Putin is elected. Mark my words. More than they are so now. USA is scrambling to draft a UN security resolution because they don't want Russia to put weapons in space. All of a sudden, under obligations under the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, they want to basically reinforce the obligations under that treaty. So they're drafting a new UN, which is just dumb. I mean, the Russians they're a jurisprudent bunch, so they will play ball in this sense, but I don't think they're going to take it seriously. I think at this point in time, even if you had a treaty, nobody's believing anybody. Since the collapse of the Minsk agreements, I can't see anybody trusting anybody anymore. That's your daily update, folks. Yeah, here we go. Let's see what happens, guys. And stay tuned, because next week, we're going to have a special guest who's going to talk about something called the aerosol masking effect and why that is going to get much, much worse, and not for the reasons you think. Stay tuned.